Hi, boys and girls. Okay, so today on Who Was Milton Hershey, we're on chapter 4. Mr. Hershey goes to Chicago. In 1893, another trip changed Milton's life. That year, he went to Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition. It was held to celebrate the 400 years since Christopher Columbus had arrived in the New World. For the fair, dozens of new buildings were put up in a Chicago park. All were made from wood and white stucco. The fair was nicknamed White City. There were exhibits from around the world. People would ride in boats on man-made lakes. They tasted new treats, including something called a hamburger. Visitors rode the first Ferris wheel. Sorry. In one building with food exhibits, Milton saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A German candy company had made a temple out of chocolate. It stood 38 feet tall, about as tall as a 4-story building. Hershey was stunned. And in a building with machinery exhibits, there were iron machines clanking and puffing away. The machines were making chocolate. The L.M. Lehman Company from Germany had set up a complete chocolate making factory right there in White City. A machine roasted the new cocoa beans. Another machine ground the roasted beans into powder. Into the powder went sugar and flavorings. Hershey watched the machine for hours. He asked endless questions. He returned again and again, even bringing friends and people from his company to see the machine. His cousin, Frank Snavely, said that Milton had told him the caramel business is a fad, but chocolate is something we will always have. Hershey was so convinced of this that he bought every piece of gear that Lehman had in Chicago. He even ordered more machines from Germany. He took everything back to Lancaster, where Milton set up the new Hershey Chocolate Company in the corner of his caramel factory. As he had with caramels, Milton experimented. The chocolate made by the new German machines was good, but it wasn't perfect. It was still a little bitter. Milton wanted to make milk chocolate, as Nestle had done. Milk chocolate was sweeter and lasted longer than the chocolate available at the time. It could be molded into shapes. It would not melt as quickly as regular chocolate. One big problem: Nestle wouldn't share that secret. Milton returned to his family's first home, which he used as a lab to work out the new chocolate formula. He mixed and poured and sampled and cooked. He tried it and tried again. And finally, he got pretty close. Hershey came up with a recipe for a type of chocolate milk. I meant to say milk chocolate. With that recipe in hand, he made a big decision. Milton Hershey decided to sell his caramel company and devote all of his energy to chocolate. It was a huge risk, but Hershey was confident that chocolate was the future. Now, another section in here, in this section of the story, is called The History of Chocolate, and I wanted to make sure you were able to hear this part because it's important. Chocolate is made from the cacao plant. Cacao grows in trees in places where it is hot and humid. Scientists call the plant Theobroma cacao, which means food of the gods. Pods about the size of footballs grow on the tree. So imagine the size of a football. That's how big these pods are that grow on the tree. Inside each pod are about 30 to 40 cocoa beans that are the size of strawberries. So, strawberries are about like that big. Maybe some smaller, some bigger, depending. It takes about 350 beans. 350 beans to make 1 pound of chocolate. The ancient Aztecs and Maya harvested cocoa pods from the trees in Central America. They mixed the ground up beans with water to make a bitter but popular drink. The word chocolate comes from Exotol, the Aztec word for this drink. In the 1500s, invading Spanish soldiers drank it and disliked it. When it was tried in Spain, the Spanish added sugar or honey. Sweet chocolate was born. Then, in 1847, an English company, J.S. Fry and Sons, found a way to mix cocoa butter with cocoa powder. When it happened, it was a chocolate bar. Finally, in 1875, Swiss scientists Daniel Peter and Henry Nestle mixed milk with chocolate to make it even creamier. Today, several countries in Africa produce most of the world's cocoa plants used to make the chocolate. The number one cocoa producing country is Cote d'Ivoire on the west coast of Africa. Cocoa also grows in Ghana, Indonesia, and in South America. Okay, so we're going to pause here and take notes over this chapter 4, and then we'll come back together and do chapter 5 together. Chapter 5, Here Comes Kitty. Milton Hershey didn't spend all of his time working. In 1897, he met Catherine Sweeney, who was nicknamed Kitty, at a candy shop in upstate New York, where he traveled to sell his caramel. She and Milton began seeing a lot of one another. She later moved to New York City, and he visited her there often. Hershey didn't tell anyone back home about Kitty until after they were married in 1898. His family and the candy company workers were very surprised when he first brought her home. Hershey was 41 at the time, a successful and serious businessman. Kitty was only 26 and enjoyed shopping, entertaining, and having fun. Together, they would make a terrific team. In 1900, with his chocolate dreams in mind, Hershey sold the Lancaster Caramel Company for $1 million. A new century was starting, and America was about to get its first candy bar. After the sale, Milton took Kitty to Europe. They visited many countries in Europe, including France, Germany, and Austria. They also traveled to Egypt, where they rode camels near the famous pyramids. Milton also made sure to try many types of candy. He was always looking for new ideas for his company. Milton loved spending time with Kitty away from the factory. With her, he could relax and not be the boss. Milton liked to gamble and play cards. Unlike other very wealthy businessmen, he didn't spend much money on himself. But he loved to buy Kitty jewels and furs. Sadly, he also had to spend money on many doctors. Though Kitty seemed healthy, she had a disease that often weakened her muscles. Milton did his best to help her. He took her to the doctor after doctor, trying to find a cure. No one could. No one could stop the disease. But they did try to make her feel better for a while. Kitty's illness meant she could not have children, and that was a terrible disappointment. But Milton and Kitty found a way to have many children be a part of their lives. Even before he had the perfect formula for milk chocolate, Milton took another big risk. He bought 1,200 acres in a nearby dairy church. Hershey wanted to build a huge chocolate factory and a town for all of its workers. He planned everything from the start so that it would all be perfect. Before the Hershey factory made one chocolate bar, Milton had laid out the streets and parks of his town. He hired architects to design the homes and buildings. He included a bank, a zoo, and schools. Hershey even set up a trolley car line to help workers get around town and to travel to and from the factory. Then he built the huge factory. Its giant smokestacks had his name in big letters, Hershey. Hershey tried something else new. He made chocolate on an assembly line. An assembly line is a way to make a product by adding one thing at a time as the product moves along the work line. Instead of one maker worker making a product by himself, the steps are divided among many workers. Each is in charge of one step. With the work with the worker does which of the workers does over and over. Products can be made faster and faster in greater numbers this way. In Detroit, Henry Ford had used the assembly line to make cars. So here's the chocolate assembly line. And there's Henry Ford with his car, and that's how they would do their assembly line. Obviously, this one's done. The plan soon sent the smell of chocolate floating all over the valley. As the workers moved into town, they enjoyed the smell too. Though the town did not have an official name yet, people were already calling it the sweetest place on earth. While his dream town and factory grew, Hershey kept experimenting with chocolate. Finally, by early 1904, he was satisfied. He had a way to make milk chocolate that could be shipped safely. It was sweet, creamy, and could be molded into bars. It would last for several days without being kept cold. All of America, not just Pennsylvania, was about to get the first real taste of milk chocolate. Each bar was wrapped in a dark maroon paper with large gold letters that said Hershey. Each bar cost just 5 cents. By 1905, the factory was making as much as 100,000 pounds of chocolate a day. That's a lot. Okay, now, chocolate the Hershey way. After the cocoa beans were picked clean, they were roasted. A special machine rolled the beans to take off the hard outer shells. Then the beans were ground into a liquid called cocoa liquor. The liquid was mixed with sugar, vanilla, milk, and any flavors needed. Huge machines mixed and stirred all the ingredients together in a secret process. This resulted in a coarse powder called chocolate crumb. Cocoa butter was added, and then the chocolate was mixed again. After the mixture was right, machines poured the liquid chocolate into molds. The molds put Hershey's name on each bar. After the chocolate cooled, a worker knocked the bars out of the mold with a hammer. Then the bars were wrapped in a paper and put into boxes. So here is a picture of a Hershey bar. I'm sure you've seen one. That's what the first Hershey bars look like. Okay, and the chapters that we read from to today were chapters 4 and 5. And chapter 4, since we have to write where we began, it began on page 32 and we ended on 51. Okay, so let's go ahead and take our notes, and I will see you guys back on Monday. Have a great weekend.